digestion for both health and vitality. So, Corinne gave you a little bit of information about me. Again, I'm a yoga therapist. I recently completed a program through Spanda Yoga Movement Therapy, which was about a little over a year-long program, which was amazing. I'm a yoga teacher and an Ayurvedic health counselor, and I've done most of my training through the Himalayan Institute in Honesdale, Pennsylvania, which is an amazing place if you're ever looking for a retreat or a workshop. I highly recommend it. So this is more from me, but I wanted to kind of give you guys a little agenda for the evening. But I tend to kind of go off the rails and give a fire hose people with a ton of information. So I put this in here to keep myself on point. So I'm going to give a little brief introduction about what Ayurveda is. We're going to talk about Agni, which I'll give you lots of information about that. But Agni is basically the digestive fire, to put it simply. We're going to talk about the qualities. We're going to talk about Ama, and we're going to really get into the different Agni imbalances, so those digestive imbalances. So my hope for you guys is that you're able to take the information that I have given you tonight and be able to apply that to yourselves to get a little bit better of an idea about where your digestion is. Is it perfect, or can it be tweaked a little bit? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? So hopefully my goal is for you guys to be able to have that information, to be able to go and run with it. We are going to talk about poop, so that's a little bit of a heads up right there. We're going to talk about how to find balance with your digestive fire, how to find that balance of your Agni. And we're going to talk about how you do that with taste and also the qualities of food, things to favor and avoid based on what your particular Agni is, some common healthy mistakes, things that we do that we think are healthy but might not be serving us in the best way, and some basic general guidelines that everybody can do regardless of what your Agni type is, and also some super simple Ayurvedic principles to help support your Agni as well, regardless of where you land in that Agni spectrum. So a little bit about Ayurveda. Ayurveda is a medical science that has been rooted in India. It's been around for about, some books say 5,000 years, some books say 10,000 years, but it's been around for a really, really long time. And Ayurveda translates into the science of life, or the study of life. And it's one of those things that's really kind of hard to explain in a few sentences. It's more like a world's view. It's like looking through a completely different lens. If you have a background in the medical field, in Western medicine, it's kind of like putting on another pair of glasses to be able to kind of look through this lens of Ayurveda to be able to really sort of understand it. There are, as we go through the presentation, you're going to hear me mention a lot of words in Sanskrit. So all of the original Ayurvedic texts are all in Sanskrit. Let's see, what else can I tell you about Ayurveda? So one of the big things, so it's primarily a preventative medicine, right? And we use diet, lifestyle, herbs, yoga, meditation, daily routine, tons of different things to help bring the body back into balance. So it's not a one size fits all approach. When you work with an Ayurvedic practitioner, they'll look at you, at the whole person, all the different layers of the self, to determine where your imbalances are. So it's not like I can say, oh, take this herb or do this one thing and it would kind of be good for everybody. It's really unique to the individual. So the foundational sort of principle in Ayurveda is this idea of the elements. So one of the biggest mistakes that we make as humans is thinking that we're separate from the universe. We're really a microcosm of the macrocosm. So we are part of the universe. We're not separate. What happens out there happens within our physical body as well. So everything in the universe is made up of the 5 elements: ether, air, fire, water, and earth. So we have all of those elements within us as well. So we can look at different things in the universe and say, okay, this has more of the earth quality, this has more of the water quality, or fire, or air, or ether. So, just to give some examples, in the physical body or in ourselves, ether can show up as the spaces in the sinuses, the space in the alveoli, the little sacs in the lungs, the space in the stomach when it's empty. Air is not only the breath, but also the movement of thoughts. It's the movement of your heartbeat. Air governs any type of movement. And then we have fire, which is what we're going to talk mostly about tonight. And that is anything that it has transformation. So when we eat food, it gets transformed into energy. It nourishes our tissues. So any thinking or intelligence, that's all governed by the fire element. And then water, kind of simple to see that one, the blood, the saliva, the mucosal membranes. Earth, all the heavy parts of our body, so the bones, the organs, the dense connective tissue, that's all governed by the earth element. So with Ayurveda, we look at everything through this lens. We look at, okay, how much of each one of these elements is going to be in different things. And then, so Ayurveda's definition of health, or swastha, is Sanskrit for health, is having strong digestion, physical comfort, ease in the body, and bliss in the mind. So that's a huge, that's better than like, oh, I don't have joint pain, or, oh, I'm not nauseous, right? We look at the whole thing, every layer of the self, and being truly healthy is having all of those things, being able to not only digest your food, but digest your life, your experiences, feeling good, feeling light and comfortable in your body, being able to move with comfort, being able to interact with other people comfortably, and having bliss in the mind, being peaceful, being content, being happy. So that's a tall order. So we're going to talk about Agni, which is the fire of digestion. So like I mentioned before, Agni, that fire element, is what digests our food. So we eat food, we have this beautiful body that takes in food, and it digests the food, it processes the food, but it's also this idea of an intelligence, right? So our bodies, we're able to take in this food, and then our bodies have this intelligence to be able to say, okay, I need this, but I don't need that, and we eliminate what we don't need. So Agni will be those digestive enzymes that actually physically digest the food, but it's also that inner intelligence. So optimal Agni is like the perfect campfire. This is the analogy I feel like in my mind I'm able to wrap my head around a little bit easier. So I'm hoping you feel the same way. So with a nice strong Agni is just like that perfect campfire. You don't want it to be too hot. You don't want it to be too small. You don't want it to be too smoky. So in order to do that, you need to give it the right fuel, the right amount of fuel, and enough air and movement for for air to kind of move around the logs and the wood to keep that fire going. So having that optimal level of Agni is just like that perfect campfire. So keeping those things in mind, thinking about the fuel being what you take in, the food that you take in, and also the experiences and all of that other stuff that we're asking our Agni to digest. So there's 3 different types of digestive imbalances according to Ayurveda. The first one is Manda Agni, which is simply put categorized by Agni that's just too weak. Okay. The second one is Tikshna Agni, which is overall just really too strong, too fiery. And the third one is Vishama Agni, which is inconsistent. So it kind of goes up and down. It's not, some days it's too weak, some days it's too strong. So I want to introduce this idea of ama. So ama in the body is actually toxic buildup. So it's the toxin, it's when we take in food, when we are out and about, we're taking in environmental pollutants, things like that. We're around maybe toxic people, taking in a lot of content, whether it be from social media or things that we're reading, or how we're spending our time throughout the day. That agni needs to digest all of those things and get rid of what we don't need. So when you don't have that optimal level of agni, that ama can start to build up. So it's this heavy sort of sticky substance. And there's different ways that ama shows up in the body. So it shows up as brain fog, joint pain, an actual white or coating on your tongue. It can show up through body odor, bad breath. So that's all ama, this toxic buildup. Um, like I was saying earlier, we have this system where we take food in and we eliminate what we don't need. And we also so we have all these four different channels of elimination. We have we poop, we pee, we sweat, and we also eliminate waste through the breath as well. So when there's buildup, when there's that toxic buildup, it can show up in all of those places. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit more about ama as we go forward. So I want to introduce this concept of the qualities or gunas. This is really an important thing that I really want you guys to understand. So I'll go slow through it. But as I was saying before, Ayurveda is almost like looking through the world through this like completely different lens than what you're used to looking at the world through. So as an Ayurvedic practitioner, when somebody comes to me with an issue, or I'm always trying to figure out what qualities that certain issue has. So everything in the universe has these different types of qualities. Some have qualities that are, maybe more cold. Some have qualities that are maybe more hot, but everything in the universe can kind of be described by using these words. So we have cold, the opposite of cold is hot. We have moist or oily, the opposite of that is dry. Grounding or heavy, the opposite of that is light. Smooth, the opposite of that is rough. Sharp, the opposite of that is mild. So we'll be looking at the qualities or the gunas and be layering those on, and sort of looking at the food we eat to be able to determine what qualities the food that we eat has. Okay, so we'll come back to this idea in a little bit, but I just wanted to throw that out there before we move on, just so you can have it in the back of your mind. So just coming back to these three different digestive imbalances, and knowing now that everything has these different types of qualities, just to describe the digestive imbalances a little bit further. The first one is Manda Agni. So I put this picture in here of this like sticky, kind of heavy mud. So the characteristics of Manda Agni, that Agni that's too weak, the qualities that it has are cold, moist, and heavy. Okay. So when you have Manda Agni, that fire, that burning, or that cooking isn't strong enough, and which can result in ama as well. Okay. Because you don't have that heat and that proper heat, and also that sort of fire, that intelligence to be able to burn off what no longer serves you. So Manda Agni the qualities are cold, moist, and heavy. And that's when the Agni is too weak. And the next one is Tikshna Agni. And that's when that fire is too strong. I'm sure you guys have all, like, maybe cooked a steak on the grill, or did something on the frying pan. It was too hot and the outside burnt, but the inside just kind of stayed undercooked. So that's the same idea with Tikshna Agni. The fire is just too hot. So it's not complete, it's cooking, overcooking some of the food that we take in and undercooking the rest. What you take in is just not being processed appropriately, and therefore you can't assimilate it appropriately. You can't take in what you need. So again, that's going to result in ama. And the qualities of that are hot, dry, and sharp. And then the third one, which I find most people that come to me have, is this Vishama Agni. And this is an Agni that's inconsistent. There's periods where it's really hot, and then there's periods where it's too cold. So it can't really be described in either Manda or Tikshna, too hot or too weak. It's just kind of like up and down. And the qualities of that Agni are dry, light, and rough. Okay. So just to kind of get a little bit more, I'm just going to move your faces out of the way here for a second. Okay. So I want to get a little bit into each one of the digestive imbalances, so you guys can have an idea of where you kind of lie on the spectrum. And then as we move forward, you're going to have some tools, things to use to take home to balance yourself out, balance that Agni out. But that Manda Agni, that slow, heavy, cold fire. So again, this picture of like that muddy, heavy, sticky idea, I feel, is a good image to have. That's basically hypometabolism. So your metabolism is low. When people have Manda Agni, they tend to have more constipation. There's a lot of like heaviness and sluggishness in the body. The channels just you don't feel light. You eat something and you feel heavy, you feel tired. And that, because we are not just our physical body, we have all these other layers, or we call them koshas of the body, and one affects the other. You're going to start to feel that heavy sluggishness in the mind as well. So very common for somebody that is prone to constipation to have this sort of like sluggish, kind of stuck in the mud feeling in their physical body, and maybe in their mind, maybe be a little bit more prone to like depression or sleepiness, things like that. And the appetite is really weak. So there's never or rarely a time where they're like, oh, I'm starving, right? Like you're just like, well, it's time to eat. I guess it's breakfast time. I guess I need to eat. These folks tend to have colder or clammy skin. So there is that moisture, that moist element to it. So it can be like cold and like clammy. These people tend to, when they get sick, have more like colds or congestion. So again, coming back to these qualities, these cold and heavy and wet qualities, those same qualities can get kind of stuck in the sinuses as well and show up as mucus. It can show up, it can create edema and obesity as well. So the next one is that Tikshna Agni, where it's too hot. So that fire is just really hot, burning stuff on the outside, leaving the inside undercooked. And this is basically hyper metabolism, so that fast metabolism. You need that time to eat the food, to be able to digest it, for your body to be able to break it down appropriately so you can assimilate and take in what you need. So folks with this sharp or hot Agni tend to have like heartburn, like inflammatory conditions. It could be like like a colitis or like ulcers, anything that when you think of it has that hot, sort of fiery, sharp quality to it. Inflammatory things, diverticulitis, things like that. And again, because we're not separate from our physical body, this can also have an effect on our thoughts, our feelings. And these folks tend to be a little bit more judgmental or critical of themselves or other people. Okay. And then the third one is this Vishama Agni, which I had mentioned. I feel like this is something that's more common, is one of the most common. I find for the people that I see where there's periods of, that constipation. So I'm not sure if let me just backtrack 1 second. Oh yeah, so I did mention, so diarrhea. So constipation is for that Manda Agni that's really slow and heavy. And then folks with Tinkshna Agni, those are more periods of having diarrhea. And then the Vishama Agni, where you kind of go through this roller coaster of up and down, periods of constipation, periods of having diarrhea, just not, your digestion's kind of all over the place. And with these folks, you tend to have a little bit more of an irregular appetite. With the Tinkshna Agni people, that fiery, fast digestion, they're the people like this. That's me. Like, I can't skip a meal. Like, I get angry, I need to eat like right away. Their appetite is really, really strong. Whereas the Vishama Agni, that variable Agni, it's irregular. One day it's one thing, one day it's another. And again, you're going to have variable digestion. So sometimes you'll have periods of constipation, periods of diarrhea. Vishama Agni is dry. So think about those elements of air and ether. So those two elements are very dry. So there's a lot of those elements in this type of Agni. So you're going to get periods of like having like abdominal distension, right? Just like a lot of air in the body. Indigestion, like burpee, gas, gurgling, things like that. A lot of, if people, you're sitting next to them like at the library and their like stomach is making like all those noises. That's Vishama Agni. So a lot of times what can happen is this tends to show up as anxiety or insecurity, fear. So our Manda Agni people tend to kind of slip a little bit more into that sluggish, heavy depression, or just kind of feeling stuck, unmotivated. Vishama Agni, where it has a lot of air and ether in it, the mind is a little bit lighter, and can you see how that anxiety, there's a lot of movement in the mind, that itself has a lot of those dry, airy sort of qualities to it. So that's kind of what happens with folks with this type of Agni. So so we just went through the three of them. So you might be like, oh, my digestion is fine, right? I'm really regular every day. But if you can sort of relate to these different things that are happening in the mind, that might be where your Agni is sitting at this time. So Sama Agni is nice, balanced, optimal Agni. So it's that perfect campfire, right? We're digesting what we need. We're digesting our lives. We're able to experience different experiences, have interactions, whether they're positive or negative, and take them in and be able to let it go, right? Just like we do with our food. We take in the food, we absorb the nutrients, and then we get rid of the waste. The same thing happens with life that we take in, right? When we have a nice, strong Agni, we're able to weather the storm a little bit easier. we're able to be a little bit stronger. We're able to bounce back a little bit better. With Sama Agni, there's going to be really good quality tissues. You know, the skin's going to be really nice, strong bones, clear skin, and eyes. You know, some folks, you'll see people with really red, bloodshot eyes. That is typically common with Tingshna Agni, that fire, that hot Agni. But with Sama Agni, when it's nice and balanced, they have really clear eyes. Um, there's that mental clarity and discernment. You know, you're able to take things in and see them for what they are, right? Not kind of like, you know, making assumptions or taking things personally. You're able to kind of just take it in and take it for what it is without sort of layering on any kind of story that you have or insecurity that you have to make it to be something different than it really is. So you, with good quality Agni, you have this clarity, this really beautiful clarity. And you have energy and vitality, right? Like that, I think, is the most important thing. You're able to, you know, get up in the morning, feel excited and alive and positive about your day. And that's a really good feeling. Healthy bodily processes. So, you know, your bowel movements are regular, your, if menstrual cycle is regular, everything's sort of running like a well-oiled machine. And you have this sense of ease in the body. So there isn't joint pain, there isn't discomfort. You're able, the joints have this really healthy, like lubrication to them where you're able to move with ease. And of course, having daily cleansing bowel movements. So, to start to kind of get an idea of the state of your own Agni, we'll just go through a few things, and you can write it down, or you can, you know, just make notes for yourself, or just, you know, make notes in your mind just to kind of get an idea. And you may already have an idea now where you're at. But one of the first things you want to look at is, do you have ama? So that can show up, like I said, as that coating on the tongue. That's one of the first things that we look at when I work with clients with digestive issues, is to look at their tongue to see where they're at. With Vishama Agni, it's not going to be like a black brown coating on your tongue, but it might just have like a little brownish sort of black tinge to it. With Tingshna Agni, same thing, like a yellowish green kind of tinge to it. And then Manda Agni is white. So when you wake up in the morning, that's when you want to look at your tongue, check it out, see what's going on. But this will give you a little bit of an idea as to where your Agni is sitting at this time. But don't let this kind of be the end all be all. Let really go by your symptoms, your bowel movements, how you feel in your body to be able to determine where you're at. And then you want to pay attention to how you feel after you eat. So we should be feeling light and energetic. We shouldn't be feeling sluggish and tired or heavy. And not only do you want to feel good physically, but you want to feel good energetically. So by that I mean not only having energy, but also how do you feel, like more on an energetic layer of the body sort of idea. Do you feel light and uplifted? Do you feel a little bit maybe scattered? Do you feel grounded? So those are the things that you want to pay attention to. And those are going to give you an idea as to how the food you eat, how you're responding to the food you eat. And I'll talk about common sort of healthy mistakes that we make, but you could be eating perfectly healthy food, but not feel physically well. Like maybe you have a little bit of a stomach ache, or maybe you need to, have an antacid, or have, like a ginger tea or something to kind of help you digest that. Or maybe you just don't feel light and alive after you eat. So just sort of paying attention to how your food makes you feel physically, energetically, like literally how much energy you have, but also how does your energy feel? Do I feel happy and light and invigorated, or do I feel sluggish or scattered or heavy? And pay attention to your hunger cues. So what are those like? um, do you have strong hunger cues? Like, are you starving? Are you super hungry? Are you not hungry at all? So just kind of pay attention to those, and that will give you an idea as to where your Agni is at this time. And we'll talk a little bit about later on how to stoke that Agni. So if you're the type of person, I know I was talking to a student this morning who was saying that she wakes up in the morning and she doesn't feel like she's hungry. And for her, that might be okay, maybe you just need to eat a little bit later, but there are ways that we can sort of stoke that Agni. So when you do eat, you're able to digest and process that food in a healthy way, as opposed to just like, okay, it's breakfast, I'm just going to take this in and hope for the best. And then, of course, paying attention to your bowel. So I'm like totally like a fifth grade boy when it comes to talking about poop. So I find a lot of enjoyment in it. So I'm just giving you guys a little bit of warning. The next slide is going to have a poop chart on it. So we're going to talk about poop a little bit here. All right. So you may have seen this before. This is the Bristol stool scale. And these are kind of like all the different types of poops that you can have. So when you're pooping, take a look at your poop. And if you have type 1 or type 2, that's going to tell you that your Agni is going to be a little bit on the drier side. So you're going to have that Vishama Agni, that dry Agni. So the poop has more of the air and ether elements to it. It's going to be much drier. So it could look like little deer poops, or like this, where they're like little deer poops kind of stuck together. Type 3, we're getting a little bit closer to where we want to be. So there's like a sausage, but with some cracks on the surface, indicating that there is still some of that dryness in there. So if you remember the picture I had of that sort of like dry, cracked earth to explain what the Vishama Agni looked like, that's kind of that same idea, that dryness. And then type 4, which is optimal. This is what you want to have, is a nice sausage or snake with smooth and soft edges on it. So it should come out pretty much all in one piece. You should be pretty clean when it comes out. So this is our goal, is to have a type 4 poop. As we start to get down to type 5, 6, and 7, where there's the edges aren't as clearly defined, they're a little bit it's softer, more like a diarrhea type poop, that's when you're going to have that tinkshna, so that hot sharp Agni, or it could be slow and heavy. So you have to kind of determine, like, when you're pooping, is it like fast hot diarrhea, right? That's going to tell you it's tinkshna Agni, right, where there's too much fire. Or is it kind of like a slow, sticky, heavy sort of mushy sort of poop, right? That's going to tell you that's more of that Manda Agni, okay, with more of that heavy, earthy, moist quality to it. So hopefully that helps and gives you a little bit better of an idea of where your Agni stands based on the poop chart, and also the different symptoms that we talked about with the different types of Agni. So finding balance, how do we, now that we know that we have these imbalances, how do we find that balance and have that perfect campfire? So Ayurveda is such an amazing science. It's so vast, and it encompasses pretty much everything. But it has such simple rules. And this is one of just maybe two rules in Ayurveda. It's like increases like and opposites decrease. So if you can remember that and you can remember the qualities, you're set. You're good for everything, and you can just take it from there. So like increases like and opposites decrease. So I think this next slide. Okay, so coming back, let me switch back here. So this rule is referring to those qualities that I talked about in the beginning: the hot and the cool, the dry and the moist, the rough and the smooth. Okay, so that's what I'm referring to here when we talk about this like increases like, opposites decrease rule. So again, just to remind you, the qualities of Manda Agni are cold, moist, and heavy. Tikshna is hot, dry, and sharp. Vishama is dry, light, and rough. So if we think about that, like increases like, and opposites balance, or opposites offset, I forget which word I used. If you had Manda Agni, you don't need any more cold, moist, and heavy in your life. Okay. So if your digestion is slow, you don't need any more ice cream or yogurt or anything that's cold, moist, and heavy. If your Agni is too strong, you're not going to need any more margaritas and enchiladas, right? Anything fiery and hot. Adding that type of fuel to that already too hot fire is going to aggravate your Agni even more and create more of that hot, sharp, diarrhea, and all of those symptoms. And then with Vishama Agni, we want to offset that dry, light, and rough with moisture, a little bit of heaviness, and a little bit of smoothness. Okay. So that'll make more sense as we move forward. But just keep that in mind. Always come back to the qualities and that idea that like increases like, and then the opposites balance. So just a little reiteration here for you, and you'll have this in the recording. So this is a nice thing to refer to. So if you have that Manda Agni, you're going to favor warm, light, dry, and rough foods. Avoid the cool, grounding, moist, and smooth. You can go through here, same idea. With when you have that hot, sharp fire, hot Agni, you want to offset it with things that are a little bit more cool and grounding, and a little bit more mild as opposed to sharp. And then Vishama Agni, there's a lot of lightness and dryness, so we want to offset that with warm, grounding, moist, and smooth foods. Okay, and the same thing, so I'm throwing out the tastes in here as well. And we'll go through as we move on. I'll give you different foods that have all these different tastes and give you ideas of foods that you can be eating. But just wanted to throw this out there as well. So Manda Agni, there's a lot of, you want to avoid sweet, sour, and salty, right? So somebody that has slow, heavy digestion maybe is a little bit overweight, doesn't need to be eating any more sweet and salty food. That person is going to need more food that's going to be bitter, pungent, and astringent. So those three tastes are lighter. They have more of the air and ether elements to them, as opposed to the sweet, sour, and salty that has a lot of the earth and water, the heavier elements, right? We're trying to get away from that heaviness. So we want to lighten up the food that we eat by incorporating foods with these tastes that are pungent and astringent. And then for the Tinkshna Agni, again, so if you think about it, these folks don't need any more sour and salty. Like, even just think about sour and salty and you get, like, burning in your stomach, or like your mouth starts to water. You don't need any more of that fire. So we'll offset that with the taste of bitter, sweet, and astringent. And then Vishama Agni. So Vishama Agni is that dry Agni, where it has that quality of being dry and sort of variable. So it's already really light, right? So we want to give it a little bit more heaviness. We want to take away those pungent, bitter, and astringent tastes, right? Like, think about all your greens and spicy foods. We want to give them more of that sweet, sour, and salty, those heavier foods that are a little bit heavier. And I'm going to ground that Agni a little bit more. All right, so Manda Agni, again, is that weak Agni, cold, moist, and heavy. We want to avoid those sweet, sour, and salty foods. So you want to avoid really sweet fruits like bananas, dates, figs, watermelon, anything that's really sweet and moist. I'm not saying don't eat it all together, because, ultimately bananas, dates, figs, and watermelon are really good for you, but that's something you don't want to be eating those every day. Heavier vegetables, more starchy vegetables like pumpkin and sweet potatoes, or watery vegetables like zucchini, summer squash, avocado. Do you see how all of those things have that cold, moist, and heavy quality to them? Easy to see here with yogurt, sour cream, ice cream, all of that stuff is going to be cold, moist, and heavy. So the more of those types of things that you layer on to your already weak fire, even if you envision like a campfire and you throw like a quart of sour cream on there, it's going to put it out, right? Same thing with your digestive fire. Things like pasta, baked goods, red meat, all of these things are really heavy. Oily fish, again, really heavy and moist. And of processed foods is across the board. We want to stay away from those as much as possible. So limiting the foods that have those qualities of cold, moist, or heavy. Okay, great. What can I eat? All right, so we want to favor those pungent, bitter, and astringent tastes. So those are going to be things like berries, cranberries, pomegranates, and you eat pomegranate seeds and you get that sort of like dry feeling on your tongue, right? They're juicy, but at the same time they're astringent. There's a little dryness to them. Grapes, apples, pears, these are all going to be light. They're going to be lighter. They're going to introduce that light, dry quality, which is what your cold, moist, and heavy, weak Agni needs. So things like greens, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, all good stuff. Asparagus, chilies, so bringing a little bit of heat in there is great. Lighter grains like oats, barley, buckwheat, quinoa, rice. Most legumes are great. You want to avoid tempeh and tofu just because they have a lot of salt. They have a lot of that salty flavor in them. So those are going to be very heavy. So we want to limit that. Buttermilk, goat's cheese, and milk and ghee, those are all great. And if you're a milk drinker, you don't have to go, I'm not saying eliminate anything, but just keep it in mind that you don't want to go crazy with it. You want to have it in moderation, and just be mindful of how it's affecting your digestion. So any seeds, lighter meats, so as opposed to beef, you can do chicken, freshwater fish, so it's not as oily. eggs, shrimp, turkey, venison. Any herbs and spices are all going to be great. So even just adding more herbs and spices to your cooking will help to stoke that weak agni. So even if, you're like, yeah, I'm still going to eat my beef every day, like go for it, but just throw some more seasoning in there and see what changes that starts to make. So things like ginger tea, warming chais that are not too sweet. So those are all going to introduce that warming, activating quality to help offset that weak, sort of tired, heavy manda agni. Okay, so hopefully my manda agni people feel good. We're going to move on to tingshna agni. So this is categorized by being sharp and hot. So what we want to limit are anything pungent, sour, and salty. So things like fermented foods, kombucha, pickles, things like that, alcohol, caffeine, red meat, sharp cheeses, cheeses that are a little bit sweeter, okay, but like a sharp Parmesan, which is like my absolute favorite, you want to limit. Citrus fruits, those all have this heating quality to them. Nightshade veggies like tomatoes, eggplant, peppers, those are all going to be heating. And of course, processed foods. So all the fun stuff there for the Tingshna Agni people. Sorry, you can't have it. But what can you have? All right. So we're going to favor those sweet, bitter, and astringent tastes. So that's what you want to introduce. That sweet is going to offset that sharp quality of Tingshna Agni. The bitter and astringent is going to cool it off and give it a little bit more lightness. So grains are really nice. They have that sweet sort of taste to them. So when I say sweet, I'm not talking like sugar. I'm talking food that just naturally has that sweet taste. Okay. So, grains, sweet potatoes, fruit, all of that has that sweet taste to it. Eggs have a sweet taste to them. Ghee is great across the board, adding a little bit of ghee, regardless of your Agni level at this time, adding a little bit of ghee, less for the Manda Agni people, but Tingshna Agni and Vishama Agni, ghee is really, really nice. It's the perfect fuel for that campfire. Root vegetables, so they're going to be a little bit more sweet as opposed to like a broccoli or cauliflower. Mild sweet fruits, so apples, pears, grapes. So you want to stay away from things like like the citrus fruits or pineapples, anything with that sort of sharp, acidic taste to it. Chicken and fish is great as opposed to red meat. And some cooling herbs. So you can make a tea with any of these, well, maybe not cilantro, but you can add this to your food. Cilantro, fennel, mint, licorice, saffron, these all have cooling qualities to them. Peppermint tea, licorice tea, green tea is very astringent. Okay, so these are all good things to sip on throughout the day to help cool that Agni a little bit, get it back into balance. All right, so Vishama Agni, this is that Agni that's dry, and it varies. It can kind of fluctuate, go up and down. What we want to avoid, because it already has so much lightness to it, are those tastes of pungent, bitter, and astringent, right? Those tastes are really light. They have more of those air and ether qualities as opposed to the elements, as opposed to the heavier elements, like earth and water. Raw apples, you want to stay away from those. Those can be really astringent. If you're eating like a green, like Granny Smith, and it has that sort of drying feel on your tongue, those are very astringent. So staying away from those. But you can certainly cook up a green apple or a couple of apples with some ghee to make it more moist, and easily digestible. You want to stay away from dried fruits unless, again, you throw them in your oatmeal and they kind of plump up and get that moisture into them. Pomegranates, we talked about that, how they can be drying and astringent. So we don't want to add that quality onto your already dry digestive fire. Stay away from broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower. So, I mean, if you even think about those vegetables, you kind of think about like, oh, gassiness, right? So you want to stay away from anything that's going to produce that sort of gassy, airy quality in the physical body. Raw veggies too, right? Everybody thinks like, oh, I'm having a salad. But raw veggies are really hard to digest. And especially if you have a digestive fire or you have an agni that is fluctuating. And some days it might be able to tolerate breaking down raw vegetables, but other days it might be really, really difficult for you to do that. So stay away from those. They have that rough, dry quality to them, which we don't want. We want more smooth and moist. So any dry food, popcorn, crackers, granola, chips, pretzels, dry cereal, anything that's dry and crunchy, you want to stay away from. And if you're a Vishama Agni, if you're a person that has Vishama Agni, these might be the foods that you crave, right? So sometimes we tend to do that, right? We tend to crave what our body doesn't need. And that's one of the important things about getting your Agni into balance. I mentioned having that clarity, having that clear mind, being able to discern, so being able to really know what's a craving versus what does my body actually really need. So the clearer you are within your mind by stoking that Agni and having that strong Agni, the easier it is to be able to tell the difference between a craving and what your body actually needs. So alcohol, we're going to add that to the list because it can be drying. Carbonated drinks. I know a lot of people are big into like seltzer waters, but if you have this type of Agni, you want to just, try to limit that. Make sure you're not drinking those all throughout the day. And of course, processed food. All right. So Vishama Agni folks get to enjoy the sweet, sour, and salty because we want to bring those heavier, moister qualities to their diet. So favoring cooked foods, really that's kind of across the board for any type of Agni, it's really best to have warm cooked foods as much as you possibly can. They're just they're going to be easier to digest. Salads are great, depending on the time of year, depending on your particular Agni. But it's not, salads and smoothies are not something that you should be eating every day, right? So what I'm trying to get you guys, what I'm hoping that you leave here with as well is being able to say, okay, well, when I eat the salad in January, how does it make me feel? Am I cold and gassy for the rest of the day? Do I really feel nourished and uplifted? I just don't want you to go on autopilot. I want you to really think about what you're eating, why you're eating it, and how it makes you feel. So you're really making decisions based on what your body needs, as opposed to just kind of like, oh, this Instagram post told me I need to eat, this salad or whatever. So sweet foods for Vishama Agni, dates, beets, sweet potatoes. Again, I'm not talking about like cakes and cupcakes and things like that. I'm talking about food that has that sweet taste to it. Cooked apples, coconut, lemon, lime, winter and summer squash. Grains that are a little bit heavier, so quinoa, oats, wheat. Beans can be tough, right? Because they can be a little bit gassy for somebody that already has a lot of dryness in their constitution. So mung beans are pretty good. Split mung dal. These are the folks that can do the tempeh and the tofu because it has that salty taste to it. Dairy, nuts, beef, seafood, eggs. So again, we're looking for that heavy, moist quality for these guys. Ghee, again, across the board, lovely in moderation for the Manda Agni people. Oils, any herbs and spices, but use chili powder and cayenne pepper sparingly. So we want to add a little bit of heat, but not too much, not too much movement. And then licorice tea and marshmallow root tea, those are demulcents. They, if you've ever had like I make a licorice marshmallow vanilla tea in the wintertime and with the actual herbs. And when I take the herbs out, they're literally like gelatinous. You know, they have this like moist quality to them that layers on to your gastrointestinal tract. So it's super lubricating, moisturizing, really yummy, very sweet. If you've never had marshmallow root, it's very sweet, as well as licorice. It's very sweet as well. So supporting Agni. These are some healthy mistakes that we tend to make. So one of the things would be following a diet trend, right? So right now, you see everything on social media about keto. So somebody, and I'm not knocking any type of diet, like you do you, but again, Ayurveda looks at the individual. So to say like everybody should be doing keto or everybody should be intermittent fasting, according to Ayurveda, isn't the way to look at it. You need to look at the individual person. So you look at the keto diet, there's a lot of heavy, moist foods, right? So if you're already struggling with constipation, feeling lethargic, feeling heavy and tired after you eat, having a diet that's full of heavy, moist foods might not be the best thing for you to do. If you have Vishama Agni, where you're fluctuating, your Agni is going up and down, doing intermittent fasting and making your body now wonder when the next meal is coming is only going to create more of that fluctuation, right? So that fluctuation needs stability, right? It needs that container, that stability to bring it into balance. So intermittent fasting, not eating, adding more of that air and mobility and space literally into your physical body by not eating is just going to create more of that up and down, more dryness, more of those little deer poops. Drinking too much water around and during mealtime. So this is another thing, we're like, drink water. Everybody's going to drink water all day long. So if you think about that, and you do need to be hydrated, of course, but if you think about that perfect campfire, you want that digestive fire to kind of be like sort of ready to go when you eat. So if you're constantly kind of smothering it with water, or if you drink a giant glass of water before you eat your meal, it's going to be harder. You're diluting those digestive enzymes. You are putting out your digestive fire. So it's going to be harder for you to actually digest that food. I'm just going to say one other thing about that, about my campfire. Maybe it'll come back to me. And then smoothies and salads year round. So this is another thing, I know everybody loves their smoothies because you're able to get like 47 different plants in your smoothie. But when you're having something that's cold, moist, and heavy, and you're already constipated or you're already having a hard time digesting something, a smoothie isn't the way to go. right? Like if you have a nice, strong digestion, you have no you feel great, and you have a smoothie every day, like go for it. Like keep doing it. If you feel good, if you feel light and energetic and happy when you have that, then keep doing it. But just again, what I don't want to happen is you guys kind of just go into autopilot and take that and have that like sort of external locus of control. Like you don't need, you're your own best teacher. You don't need me or some social media person telling you what you should be eating. You're your own best teacher. So just having that clear mind and those clear channels to be able to really determine what it is that your body needs can only come from you, right? That's not going to come from an outside source. So again, if you're drinking smoothies and eating salads every day and you feel great, like that's great. Keep it up. But if you're drinking smoothies and eating salads year round in the wintertime or regardless of how you're feeling and you don't feel great, that's something to look at. All right. So just some general guidelines. So this is good for everybody, regardless of what type of agni that you have right now. So lots of warm home cooked food. So that's going to be better for you than any kind of processed food, making food at home. If it's, even if it's something warm, cool, moist, and heavy, if you make it at home and you make it mindfully, it's going to be infused with prana, right? This life force, this sort of love for ourselves, right? We'll be nourishing ourselves from a deeper level, as opposed to making something cool and moist and heavy that you got out of the freezer section at the grocery store. So lots of warm home cooked foods, overall just going to be better for you in general. None of us should be drinking iced drinks. So this is something you want to eliminate altogether or try to reduce it as much as you can. So coming back to that campfire analogy, drinking iced drinks is just it's diluting that digestive fire. It's diluting those enzymes and it's putting that fire out. So sip on room temperature water. And going back to the water thing, like drinking water all day long, we just go back quickly to the elements, right? Air, ether, fire, water, earth. And look at your own body, like think of your own body, like somebody that is a little bit stockier, somebody that has like moist skin, maybe oil, like more oily hair, already has, and is like just kind of like a slower, more mindful person. Like that person already has a lot of moisture, right? You look at some people and they just look so like gooey and juicy, right? Those people have a lot of moisture. They don't need to be drinking as much water as somebody, a 27-year-old, 102-pound, like 5'9" person, right? That's really light and airy, or somebody that has a lot of fire and is moving and talking and going all day long. Those people are going to need a little bit more water than the person that is already like juicy and like chill and slow and just moist already. So that's something to keep in mind too. Someone might be drinking a ton of water, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what you need. So again, all of this work helps to bring clarity, so we're able to really turn inward to be able to determine what is it that I need, right? As opposed to just a desire or what somebody else is telling me to do. You're your own best teacher. So eating without distractions is obviously important and something that I'm terrible at doing, but paying attention to your food. When you're eating your food, you shouldn't be watching TV or, scrolling through social media. You want to be able to focus on what you're eating. See if you can taste the taste, right? Is this bitter? Is this sour, pungent, astringent? be able to see if you can determine what the qualities are, but also be able to like pay attention, like, how does this food make me feel? Do I feel uplifted and positive and ready to take on the next part of my day? Or do I feel like I need a coffee and a nap? Like, you got to pay attention to how it's making you feel. And that's going to really be a good indicator as to whether or not what you're eating is actually nourishing you or just filling you, right? There's going to be a difference. So one of the rules of Ayurveda is to eat fruit separately. So fruit is great. Just don't combine it with your meal. It according to Ayurveda, the digestion process is a little bit different, and when you eat it with other food, I believe it digests quicker, and if you eat it with, or slower, I can't remember, but if you eat it with other food, it can cause like a fermentation in the belly, so they just say to eat it separately. One of the other great things to do is have your midday meal as the largest one. So breakfast and dinner should be lighter. Lunch should be your heaviest meal. That midday time is where that fire element is the strongest, right? There's the most fire in the day, right? You think about the midday sun, right? Same thing with your Agni, that digestive fire. That's going to be the strongest. So you're going to have more power to be able to digest what you take in. Make sure you're allowing your previous meal to digest before eating again. So, snacking, again, pay attention to how it makes you feel. But you want to be able to give your body that time. If you come back to that campfire analogy, if the fire is already going and there's already fuel, logs in the fire, if you add a bunch more logs, it might just put the fire out. And you want to leave room for water and movement. So you want to stop eating before you're at that point where you're full. You want to be able to have room to take in water and also have room for that movement, that churning. So think about when you overload your washing machine, right? Like there's not room for that churning action to take place. So you want to leave room for that water and movement. All right. All right, so we're getting close to the end. Supporting Agni, these are some Ayurvedic practices. So the first three they're all great. The first three are really big ones. So relaxation, like, why do I need to relax? Why do I need to be relaxed to be able to eat? Well, I'll tell you. When our nervous system, we have a part of our nervous system that is that fight or flight nervous system, right? You guys have probably all heard about that. So when you're in fight or flight, like when you're being chased by that, tiger, or you're being, whether it's a real or perceived threat, your body doesn't know the difference, and your sympathetic nervous system kicks in, and it's that fight or flight response. When you're in that stressed out place, your body's not worrying about digesting your food. Your body is worrying about keeping you alive. Okay, so all of that energy goes to keeping you alive, to breathing, energy goes to your muscles, so you can literally like run away from this real or perceived threat. So when you're in this stressed out state, and more of us are normal, like our normal window of tolerance is no longer in this place where we're able to become excited and then come back to normal, become excited and then come back to normal. We're coming out of that window of tolerance and staying out of that window of tolerance. And that's becoming more of our norm, where we're stressed out and we might not even realize it. So our bodies and our minds are constantly analyzing our surroundings for danger, right? And when that's happening, there's nothing that's worried about you digesting your lunch. Like, it's just not happening. And nothing is supporting you to lose weight either, if that is a goal that you have. When you are stressed out, your body physically that's not where your energy is going. It's going to keeping you alive. So doing these relaxation practices, doesn't have to be a meditation, but just sitting quietly, relaxing, listening to a guided relaxation. There's tons of them out there, and slowly starting to lower that sort of normal range to being in this healthier window of tolerance, as opposed to being like really way far above it as being your norm. So diet so when we're not in that fight or flight response, our bodies are able to get into that rest and digest, where your body is relaxed and you're able to digest your food. You're able to take in what you need from it. So diaphragmatic breathing, if you've taken one of my yoga classes, you'll know I talk a lot about diaphragmatic breathing, but your digestive fire sits right at your center, and you have your diaphragm is like this like sort of like dinner plate shaped muscle that sits right underneath your rib cage. So when you breathe in, what does it do when you breathe in? When you breathe in, it lowers, and then when you breathe out, it lifts back up. So it's literally like it's lowering down and rising back up with each breath. So it's literally like this bellows, right? Remember those things like where you did that like to your fireplace and it blew air in your fireplace? That's exactly what's happening when you do this diaphragmatic breathing. So when you're breathing up here, and there's no movement in your diaphragm, you're just relying on your neck muscles, and you're only lifting at your chest and your belly's not breathing. You're not getting that movement of the diaphragm to be able to stoke that agni, to keep that fire ready for taking in food, digesting the food that you need, digesting your life, your experiences, all the social media that we take in, everything that we take in through our senses, we need to digest it. And if we don't, it shows up as ama. It shows up as ama as body odor, bad breath. Ama is also the coating on the tongue. Ama is also the plaque on your arteries, right? So that sticky, yucky substance that coats your arteries, right? That is what ama is. So keeping that digestive fire strong is so important to keep all of the channels inside our bodies really clear and clean. So dinacharya is just basically means routine, having a schedule. So being consistent with bedtime and eating time. Those are two important things. Your body likes routine. It does best when it knows what to expect. So when you give it the sort of safe container of eating at the same time, sleeping at the same time, waking at the same time, your that indirectly supports your agni. Okay. So tongue scraping. So this is a tongue scraper. If anybody has ever seen one of these or used one, I get a bunch of them from Amazon. So tongue scraping should be the first thing that you do in the morning. Check out your tongue. Think about, look at what it looks like. Do you have that coating? And if you do, analyze what you had the next day. Maybe it wasn't a piece of cheesecake and McDonald's, but maybe you had just a really crappy day at work, and maybe you spent 4 hours on social media. Maybe it's showing up that way. So you just take the tongue scraper. If you don't have one of these, you can just use a spoon to start if you want to do it, but you should be scraping your tongue every morning. Literally scrape, rinse, scrape, rinse, scrape, rinse. Do that a few times and look at it. It's like one of my teachers calls it an ama meter. So look at or an agni meter. Look at what's on there. If it's like if it's like a thick cream cheesy coating, then that's really ama. If it's like just a saliva-y, whitish something, like that's maybe just saliva. But take a look at it. So we should be tongue scraping every morning. Not only does that clean and allows the ama or root to escape, but it also, all the places on the tongue have corresponding places in the gastrointestinal system. So when you create when you scrape, it activates these sort of points on the tongue, which then tell the GI system, like, okay, wake up, like we're up. Another nice thing that you can do that helps to support your agni for after your tongue scraping, having before coffee or tea or whatever you do in the morning, have a cup of hot water, like not tea hot water, but what I do is I boil water in my kettle and then I do half hot water and then half just cold water, because you want to be able to drink it. Like you don't want it hot like a tea. You want to be able to drink it kind of fast. And so the lemon water with honey will help to stoke the digestive fire. And honey has this sort of scraping quality to it. So when it goes down, which you wouldn't think because it's so smooth, but it does, it has a scraping quality to it. So it helps to kind of clean out that digestive tract, gets everything moving for our number 4 poop, like the long sausage. I told you I'm like a 5th grade boy. Anyway, so another thing that's really helpful with Agni is CCFT. So CCFT stands for cumin, coriander, and fennel. So you just get those whole herbs or spices from, wherever you can get them in the jar at the grocery store. And you just combine equal parts cumin seed, coriander seed, and fennel seed. You can sip on that, make a thermos or something of that. My kids call it chili tea because it kind of tastes, or chili water because it smells a little bit like the chili, I think because of the cumin and coriander. But you can add a little honey to it, but that will help to stoke that digestive fire. Another little tip, you can do a ginger pickle about 20 minutes before you eat. So what that is just a little thin, like coin sized, really thin piece of fresh ginger with a little sprinkle of sea salt and a little squeeze of lime, and eat that about 20 minutes before you eat, and that will start that digestive fire. If you're more on the Tinkshna Agni side where your Agni is already too hot, I would say maybe skip that. But if you're a Manda Agni or a Vishama Agni, this is something that would be nice for you. And always have gratitude, right? Have gratitude for what you eat. If it resonates with you, you can, say a little prayer or just have a moment of quiet before you eat. Just to, from a physical level, just calming the digestive system. The nervous system. So you get into that rest and digest response as opposed to being in that fight or flight response. Finding a little gratitude, just taking a moment of being quiet and sort of just resetting yourself so you're in the right frame of mind to be able to take in that food and that intelligent part of what Agni is, right? Like that intelligence that says, okay, I need this, I don't need that. That can kind of come into play and be sort of sharp and ready to go. And then doing an Agni reset every once in a while is, depending on, where you are at in your life, sometimes it's not possible. But that could just look like skipping a meal, right? Skipping dinner one night. It could just mean eating less food, making your portions smaller for a day. It could be eating a mono diet. So one of the big things in Ayurveda is khichdi. It's just split mung dal and rice with ghee and different seasonings. And it's very easy to digest. So having that throughout the day for one day just helps to reset the Agni. It helps to bring it back to, if it's super high and crazy or super slow and sluggish, it helps to kind of bring it back to that balance point. So let's see. All right, so I just threw this in here because I just wanted to give a little shout out to yoga as well. So I don't think I mentioned this in the beginning, but Ayurveda is the sister science to yoga. So they go hand in hand. The goal of Ayurveda working is self-healing. So working to heal the body, working to ourselves to heal our own body. And the goal of yoga is self-realization. So those things go hand in hand. They help each other out. And both yoga and Ayurveda work at all of the different sheets. So I mentioned the koshas, that outer layer is the physical body that we can see, we can touch. The inner layer is the energetic body, or the prana, the movement of the breath. And then we go a little bit deeper to the mind, like our emotions, what the mind chatter. And then we go even deeper into that, where you come into this more intuitive part of yourself. And under all of that is your true self. So really, I mentioned like clearing the channels. Like, we want to have all of our bodily channels, the channels of our mind, what we see, how we interact. We want all those to be clear, like crystal clear. So we're able to push aside all the other layers of the physical and everything else that's going on in the world around us, so we can be able to really dive in and understand the true self. Like, what is that? What does that mean to you? So again, I'll leave you with swastha. The definition of health according to Ayurveda is having that strong digestion, physical comfort, ease in the body, and bliss in the mind. So hopefully you learned a little something here. This is my passion. I love to talk about this stuff. I love to teach people this stuff. I love to work with people to help them feel better in their body. But my ultimate goal, I was talking to one of my students about this morning, and it's my ultimate goal is just to be able to make people or help people become a little bit happier and a little bit more in tune with their true self, because that true self is what we all share. It's God, it's the divine, it's however you want to look at it, it's pure consciousness, whatever you want to label it is. But helping people realize their true self and moving about in the world in a way of ease and peace and love, that is the way that I feel like I can make a little baby difference in the world. So thank you so much for listening, and please let me know. I think we're going to take some time for questions. So please feel free to jump in and ask away.
Feel free to unmute yourselves and ask a question, or if you have questions and you want to put them in the chat, do so, and we will check the chat.
I have a question, Sharon. It's Deborah.
Hi,
Hi.
Deborah.
So to determine which, categories of food, or those three different categories, so you then go back, you can determine that from your poop? So if you're too, dry or too wet, then you change your diet and see how that changes.
Yeah. So not only your poop, but also how you feel in your physical body, right? Are you prone to more? So yes, poop, diarrhea, constipation. But if your fire is too high, you'd be suffering from things like acid indigestion, heartburn, inflammatory type things, anything that has like this heating quality to it. I get skin rashes, red eyes, like any type of burning feeling in the body. That would all indicate more of that agni that's too high, too hot. So what you would want to do is introduce or favor more of the qualities that offset that hot quality. So things that are cooler and smoother, more mild.
Okay.
And then the same thing with the manda agni. So you're not only looking at your poop, but do you feel heavy and sluggish? Are you tired? Do you eat and it just kind of feels like it's like sitting there like a weight, like a brick in your stomach. So yes, the poop is a good indicator, but like there's other things too. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And what about dry skin? Is that,
Yeah, so dry skin. So again, I mean, that's like a whole other thing, but if you just break it down to the simple qualities, looking at the qualities, if you have dryness in your skin, you want to introduce more moisture, more oil. So that could be eating, adding a little bit of ghee into your diet, literally putting oil on your skin, eating foods that are going to be more lubricating, that marshmallow, licorice tea, things that are going to bring more of that moist quality to those moist qualities to your physical body.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Somebody said, I'm overwhelmed with all the information. And asked if you would share your slides or maybe you can prepare a handout or something.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I know. And I'm sorry I overwhelmed. So I was talking to Corinne before. I was like, oh, I kept refining and refining and refining. But it's such a vast, Ayurveda is just so huge and beautiful that it's hard to just give little nuggets without having, giving some more of the bigger picture stuff.
Yeah, I think you did a great job with it. I
Oh,
mean,
thanks.
you did.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question?
Oh, I think you're muted, Corinne.
Yeah,
Oh.
sorry. No more questions. So we'll just ask you to give us something for that I can send out with the link that people can reference because it was a lot of information. It was great information. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, for sure. I'll
Yeah.
do that. Definitely.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight.
Thank
And
you.
don't forget that Sharon has a yoga class every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. at the Annex in West Newbury if you're interested. All right.
Thanks. Great job, Sharon.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It was nice to see you all.
Take care.
You
Thanks
too.
so
Thank
much,
you,
Sharon.
It was wonderful.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
All right. Have a nice night, everyone.
Bye, guys. Good night.
Good night.